Hi, everyone. Welcome to this EU Free Assange seminar hosted by Don't Extradite Assange in preparation for the rally in Brussels next month and the concert and also the discussion at the university. My name is Deepa Govindarajan Driver. I'm an academic and trade unionist in the UK, and I've been following Julian's case as the legal observer on behalf of the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers. It is my pleasure today to welcome you here to this meeting. We're really grateful you joined us. And I'd like to start by offering the floor to John Rees, who heads the Don't Extradite Assange campaign. And just could I remind all speakers, if you wouldn't mind, to mute yourself so that we can now start because it's being recorded. Thanks. Over to you, John.
Deepa, thanks very much. And first of all, my thanks to Deepa for taking over the chairing of tonight's webinar from me. I'm afraid I contracted COVID yesterday, and so I'm really not up to the full task of chairing a meeting like this. But I did still want to come along in solidarity with those people that are organising the event in Brussels next month, and because I wanted to say one or two things about the stage that the campaign is now at. And I guess that can most simply be put like this, that we are back to the core political issues at the heart of the Assange campaign. For some considerable time now, all of last year, we've been debating the United States appeal against the decision of Westminster Magistrates Court that Julian was simply not in good enough health to be subjected to, in their words, an oppressive United States prison system. Now, that line of argument was finally closed off by the Supreme Court's decision recently not to hear any more discussion on that matter. And so what eventually is likely to happen, the most likely legal outcome now, is that Julian's lawyers will go back to the original decision in the Westminster Magistrates Court, which found against them on all the most pressing matters to do with the Assange case, found against a public interest defence for what Julian did in making the facts of those WikiLeaks files public, found against the idea that there is, although it happens to be true, in the extradition treaty a clause which says that you cannot be extradited for political reasons. Otherwise, every tin pot dictatorship the globe over would be extraditing its political enemies without any legal barrier. So those issues, the public interest defence, the right of journalists to print material that governments don't want to hear, the protection that an extradition treaty should give you, and in fact the wording of the one in Britain does give you, all that will now be tested in court again. And in some ways, although it is utter misery and extended form of oppression that Julian should be kept in prison all the way through this experience. Now 3 years just coming up in Belmarsh itself. I mean, that is an outrage. That is an outrage in itself. I was listening only today to the chief executive officer of P&O Ferries, who have just illegally sacked 800 people in Britain, appear before MPs. And when he was asked if he'd acted illegally, he said, yeah, sure, we did, but it just wasn't profitable to go the legal route, so we didn't bother. So there's somebody testifying to MPs who's ruined 800 people's lives, who's going to walk out of the Commons today, a free person, despite having admitted to the lawmakers in the land that he committed a crime. It beggars belief that while this is going on in Westminster, Julian, who's committed no crime, been convicted of no crime, is being held in Belmarsh. But that's where we are. The job now is to refocus the campaign on those central political issues. That it is the job of a journalist to tell you things which your government and the wealthy and powerful in your society don't want you to know. If that wasn't the job of journalists, all we would have, all that would be available to us, is the PR handouts of government departments and corporations. That's what they want you to know. The other stuff is news. The other stuff, the stuff they don't want you to know, that's news. And that's what journalists should be doing and it's the job that Julian Assange did without parallel and without equal. It should be the case that there is a public interest defence for this, that if it can be shown that the journalist did something which was in the interest of the public to know, that he shouldn't be prosecuted for it. In absolutely every case that WikiLeaks revealed material, that public interest defence can and should be made. And it should be the case that states, for their own purposes, cannot reach into other societies and simply pluck individuals who weren't in the United States when they committed the so-called crime, who didn't utilize the United States as a base of operations, aren't United States citizens, that they can simply be plucked from any country on the globe and taken to the United States and prosecuted. These should be absolutely elementary and basic things which every right-minded citizen believes to be true. So that's what we're doing with the campaign now. That's where we are with the campaign. We have to refocus on those fundamental issues of the freedom of information and of what a free press means, what the conditions of having a free press are. So I'm going to leave those remarks there. I just wanted to sort of frame your discussions in a way that we see the case developing from here. It's my very great pleasure now to hand over to David Rovics. Dave is a fantastic friend of the Assange campaign, and I must say of practically every campaign that I've been involved on and involved with as well. He's a fantastic entertainer. I last saw him down outside the High Court in London, entertaining the demonstrators when we had the last big demonstration on the Assange case. Very good to see him here tonight. I wish you all the best for tonight's webinar, and of course we'll be doing everything we can to build the event in Brussels in a month's time. Good luck. David, over to you.
Thank you, John. It's great to be with you guys here, and I'm really looking forward to being in Brussels next month. And just kick us off sort of with a little intro to the subject material, I suppose. Behind these prison walls, there's a man who's won awards for the work that he has done and all that it affords, such as the knowledge of the horrors committed in our name. They can't stop the message, so the messenger gets blamed. Behind these prison walls, in solitary confinement, in a land of rolling hills and royalty and other such refinement, is someone who is a hero to whistleblowers everywhere, who helped them tell the world of the crimes of Tony Blair. Behind these prison walls, you will find a mortal man. The reason why we know what happened in Afghanistan, when the soldiers of the empire, whose sons had long before were torturing civilians in their terror war. Behind these prison walls is a part of WikiLeaks, an eloquent orator, but you won't hear him speak. Locked away in silence, one who knows too well how those in power act when there's another war to sell. Behind these prison walls is one who stands accused of exactly what offenses the U.S. has refused.
to say precisely which, or to try to clear the mist, or to explain how he's not the same as other journalists. Behind these prison walls is a person they deprive of most of the things in life that keep us all alive. A person being tortured as we stand here now for revealing the war crimes. Why, when, where, how? Behind these prison walls, our very right to be informed of what the hell is going on is the teacup in this storm. With knowledge there is power, so the solution by the crown, a 24-hour-a-day indefinite lockdown behind these prison walls.
Thank you, David. That was beautiful. And I can see a lot of claps on the screen, but also lots of comments in the chat saying how moving that was. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
I'd now like to move on to introduce our panelists today and also to invite them to speak. I will introduce each of them as they come up to speak, but we have with us Andre Hunko, who is from Die Linke. We're very grateful to have you here and for the support that you have given Julian. And we have Ernest Sagaga from the International Federation of Journalists, who has a long association with supporting Julian, so thank you as well. And we have Ögmundur Jónasson, who has the dubious pleasure of kicking the FBI out of Iceland when he was Interior Minister there. So thank you for joining us, Ögmundur. I was amongst one of the speakers earlier, and because I've stepped in for John, what I will do is I will come in last and mop up any points that I think may not have been picked up from the legal observation or from the courts. But I'd like to start, if I may, with Ernest Sagaga to give us a little bit of setting the scene. But before I go into that, I wanted to make a couple of comments, which I hope Diego is ready for, which is that I was outside Belmarsh yesterday alongside a number of supporters who came to celebrate Stella and Julian's wedding alongside their family. And it was, Stella was looking beautiful and the boys were looking great. And it was wonderful to see them all. But it was, of course, a very bittersweet moment because Julian should be out with us rather than us celebrating alongside him outside the prison walls. What was also very distressing for many of us was that former British ambassador Craig Murray, who had, was in his kilt and ready to stand alongside Julian and witness the wedding, was denied access to the prison on grounds that he was a security risk. Now, this term security risk is just atrocious when you think of Craig as this 62-odd-year-old man in very frail health. So it is astonishing. And Craig's writing, of course, has brought to life many of the cruelties that have taken place behind the closed doors of the various courts in the process. And it is for this reason that Craig was denied access, but also in order to deprive us of knowing what was going on with Julian, the prison also denied any photographs of the groom on the grounds that it was a security risk. And they denied a photographer. They also prevented Julian from being married in the prison chapel where he regularly worships, because they put him in the room next door. So for those of you who are joining from Europe and weren't aware of that, I just wanted to let you know. And now I move on to Ernest to give us a brief introduction. Ernest, you had said that you have been following the case for a number of years now, right from the start, and the IFJ is the umbrella organization which holds within it the MEAA as an affiliate from Australia, a union of which Julian is member, and he had taken the advice of your colleagues when he first began to release the documents. So I'm very grateful that you're here, and if you could tell us a little bit about why you think this case is important from the point of view of journalism. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me this evening, and thank you for organizing this campaign and waging this campaign for the release of Julian Assange. As I said, I came to know about Julian back in 2010, and then we've been following and campaigning alongside you guys for his release. The story of Julian, I want to join what Mr. Rees said, and he's absolutely right. The story of Julian is actually a reflection of the way in which journalists' rights and freedoms are being curtailed, including by targeting their sources. Because clearly, if anybody knows that by giving out information to journalists, information which, as John said, is in the public interest, they will be targeted, they will be prosecuted, then clearly nobody's going to come forward, and then we'll be all the poorer for it. And therefore, we believe in the IFJ. That's why I'm here. I'm here to represent my boss, actually. He asked me to stand in for him, Mr. Anthony Beranger, who's been around the world campaigning for Julian. He's been to London, he's been to Geneva, he's been to, of course, Brussels. And we want to continue helping in any way we can. Because we believe that at issue, there is actually the need for people to feel confident, to come forward when they have information which is of public interest. And I know when Julian came to us, as I said at the beginning, my boss, when he came to my office and said, "Do you know who just called me?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Julian Assange." And who's that? This is a guy who's got a trove of information about US government and diplomats and cables. And we were joking that if ever he comes into harm's way, he will be sad because all he did is to make some diplomats uncomfortable. Clearly, nobody should go to jail for making someone else uncomfortable. And actually, one of the things that people don't really talk about, if you look at what was in those cables, and really, nobody needs to put me under waterboarding because I didn't see anything. But from what he told us, there has been nobody, either from the intelligence community, who has come to harm because he took the care and he took our advice to entrust reputable media organizations to handle this information. And what he did was to reveal some of the things that nobody can actually stand up and defend. And therefore, that was a public service that he did indeed for the American public, but also the public in other countries. So to be honest, I was disappointed. We put out a statement when his leave to appeal was denied recently. I am glad to hear from John that there is still a chance, and we want to do everything we can to make sure that this time around he gets a fair hearing and he gets released from prison. So anything we can do on behalf of my organization, I'm here to pledge our support and our continued participation in this campaign.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you in Brussels next month. Thank you for your contribution. Our next speaker, if I may, is Andre Junco. Andre, I'm very grateful that you are here. Andre, of course, is from Die Linke and also from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Andre is known for the work he led in revealing the use of the Ramstein airbase in relation to drone warfare, and for recognizing how these kinds of bloody murders are carried out in an industrial scale by supposedly civilized nations. I think it would be nice if you could next contribute in relation to your work. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepa. Thank you very much for this invitation here, for this important and very timely webinar. I see my old friend Ökmundur here, Ökmundur. I'm here mainly because I would like to inform you and sensibilize you on the development in the Council of Europe concerning Julian Assange, because it was, first I have to say that Britain is still member of the Council of Europe. It's not, didn't leave the Council of Europe, it's still bound to the European Convention on Human Rights and bound to the Strasbourg Court, which is a body of the Council of Europe. And it was Julian himself, he in November, December 2019, asked my colleagues, Sevin Dardelen and Heike Hensel, who visited him in prison, that it would be important to do something in the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, where I'm member of. And we did a hearing in January 2020 with John Shipton, with Niels Melzer, with Tony Belanger and others there. And next day we could raise an amendment in a resolution on journalists that very clearly says that Julian Assange extradition to the United States must be barred and that he must be promptly released. That's a wording. This is a position of the Parliamentary Assembly of now, sadly, only 46 states of Europe, as Russia was expelled last week. But this is a very clear position, and it's never changed. But it's only an assembly, but it's important. And some weeks later, the Human Rights Commissioner of Council of Europe, she as well followed this line. So there is a mood there for the release. On the other hand, as you know, probably the European Parliament was not able to have a similar position, and the initiatives by our left-wing colleague there, they were blocked. This is important because after the if Julian has no success in the British instances, he as well can go to Strasbourg Court. And I didn't talk to the lawyers. I don't know if the lawyers are here, but I think this is part of the strategy. And everybody who is on European soil, it's for Julian as well as for any refugee in the Mediterranean, is formally protected by the Convention of Human Rights and can go to the Strasbourg Court. And there were numerous cases they won, refugees from Ethiopia, for example, against Italy or others. So that's I feel my main job, my main contribution to the campaign to help that this body could help a bit. Of course, the court, if it comes to the court in Strasbourg, they have to decide on their own. But I would say that the environment there, with the position of the Assembly, with the position of the Human Rights Commissioner, is very much in favor of release of Julian Assange. And that's what I thought could be my best contribution to the campaign. And of course, I support here in Germany. Here in Berlin, I have met some days ago. There are always groups protesting for the British before the British embassy here, or I'm ready to do whatever I can to help for the release. And I totally agree with the framing of John Rees in the beginning of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. And moving on from Andre, and this is, I apologize because as a late chair, I may have misunderstood this, but I understand Stelios Kouloglou's colleague Yanis is here on the call. And so we move from one part of Europe to another, to Greece, where we have Stelios, who is known for his investigative journalism and who is also an anti-austerity MEP, just like Andre. And we're very grateful that you're here, Stelios. And if you are able to speak now, that would be very helpful. Okay, while that link is sorted out, while Stelios joins, if I may, I'll move to Ögmundur Jónasson. Ögmundur is a trade unionist, a journalist, a former journalist, and also a former politician. I understand from him that he is now entirely at the services of the IMF, as opposed to the previous round where he was, holding the line for us. But now he has been convinced, because he has to look after his little grandchildren on behalf of the IMF, and it's that is his new role. But I'm glad you're setting aside your retirement to join us for a little while, and thank you for all the work you have done over the years, not just to defend Julian, but to defend our rights and the integrity of the processes. Over to you, Ögmundur.
Well, let us leave the IMF out of the picture, but I proudly accept that I am a full-time grandfather, which is a very important task. I've sometimes said that for the first time in my life, I'm doing something really useful. But anyway, I have taken an interest in, and by the way, good to see you, Andre, there, and all of you, of course. Now, I have taken an interest in Julian Assange's case for many reasons, for a long time, as a human rights issue, as an example of very grotesque human rights abuse. And then I've taken an interest as a former journalist and trade unionist. It is sometimes forgotten how much the WikiLeaks papers, files have told us about the international trade agreements, which, with no exception, are done behind the closed doors and heavy curtains. And thanks to WikiLeaks, they have been revealed to the public. And these, of course, are of extreme importance, since they are negotiating away our democratic rights. And always when these negotiations have been made public, the public stops them. So also there, WikiLeaks has played a very important role indeed. Now, it's as a politician that I have had a direct encounter with WikiLeaks. I met Julian Assange a couple of times in Iceland when I was there in parliament and also in government. I was a Minister of Interior for a while, and in a letter I wrote to the British ambassador on the 20th of December last year, at the close of the year. I reminded the ambassador and the British government of my encounter with the US, and I say in the letter, which is not very long, I'm not going to read it, but part of it. In 2011, I experienced as Minister of Justice in Iceland at first hand the methods employed by US authorities in trying to secure the compliance of other states in framing the founder of WikiLeaks. That had nothing to do with justice, only politics, the brutal politics of suppressing critical journalism. Now it is British justice and British politics, and indeed British democracy, which is on trial. I ask you to urge your government to heed our demand, stop persecuting freedom, free Julian Assange. Now, we presented this to the ambassador as I say, in December, we had a vigil there for 3 days. Now, we, of course, enjoy the close contact with the present editor of WikiLeaks, Kristinn Hrafnsson, who is an Icelander and a good friend with good connections in Icelandic journalism and Icelandic politics. And I had the pleasure to be with Deepa and Kristinn, Eva Jolie, amongst other people, in Oslo last week. And I must say that this was one of the most inspiring events that I have been part of. And it was extremely well organized by an NGO veteran, John Jones, and his comrades in Oslo and in Norway. We met the Pen Club at a book shop introducing Nils Meltzer's book on Julian Assange and another book, Norwegian, which had just come out. And then there was a big gathering in a church in Oslo, abandoned church for functions like this. A lot of people came, and as I say, it was very, very inspiring indeed. Listening to the people who were talking on the platform, but not less meeting the people in the audience. There were people from all walks of life. There were people who had an interest in politics and human rights. Torbjörn Jagland was there, the former secretary of the Council of Europe, to take an example. And then there were others. And I would mention that Jagland, in fact, said in an interview with Campaign a few weeks ago, as you may know, that he was all behind the demand that Julian Assange should be set free. And I think what he heard at this meeting was to strengthen him in this. Now, I am wondering, and I think this is something to ponder on, how we are going to fare in the coming weeks and months, since it's obvious that free speech and free press are fighting an uphill battle at the moment. This we know. But I think these days have made me an optimist. And I will tell you why. Well, for a start, I listened to Chris Hedges today, his speech at Belmoras, and he ignited me with all the factual facts he presented and the fervor and the way he convinced the crowd, and certainly me. I needed no convincing, but it's good to have the inspiration, from a burning soul like his. So I think that the fact that the issue of free speech and free press is brought to the forefront is to strengthen our cause. So it is this that has made me optimistic in our very difficult times. So meeting all these people, listening to people like Chris Hedges and others makes me more optimistic than I was only a few weeks back.
Thank you, Edmundur. On that positive note, may I hand over to Jeremy Corbyn, who, Jeremy, I hope you can hear us.
Yes.
Very, very glad that you can join. As many of you will know, Jeremy Corbyn is the People's Prime Minister in Britain, in the absence of any leadership that we have. And we're very glad to have him here and that he has been consistent in his support for Julian. Over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you very much. And sorry, I'm speaking to you in a
We can't quite hear you, Jeremy. Jeremy, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but we can't quite hear you. Are you able to speak a little bit louder?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, I'll speak quite close to the phone because that way it'll work better. I'm in a community centre in in the middle of another meeting, so I will be brief and hopefully it's the point. First of all, thank you everyone for being on the call and the solidarity shown to Julian at a personal level, as well as the huge principles behind his case. And it's great that we can congratulate Julian and Stella on getting married. It's a shame we can only physically congratulate half of the couple. So there's something to work for there, in addition to the obvious issues of free speech and justice that go with Julian's case. So my hearty congratulations to Julian and Stella, and I look forward to seeing them together one day, hopefully soon. You will have all been following the legal processes in Britain. There's been a huge support amongst those that are politically serious and concerned about this at public meetings and rallies. Issues that have been raised constantly on it. The missing element of this has been the British media. British media have been almost completely absent from the trial, completely absent from any analysis of the dangers to every journalist, quite honestly, of the way in which Julian has been treated, and the lack of any serious pressure from British media on the British government concerning the potential removal of Julian from our jurisdiction to the USA. Now, we're not quite at that stage yet, but everyone on this call knows just how dangerous and perilous the whole situation is. So it is necessary for us to up the ante as far as we can on creating international pressure, parliaments, government, and so on. Paul Gavin and myself have raised it at the Council of Europe in the past several times, and we'll be raising it again in the Council of Europe at every opportunity, and also through the national journalists and other journalist organisations, because the danger to Julian being removed and put in that awful place is very, very serious indeed. So our purpose tonight surely has to be to double our efforts by supporting the big rally that's going to be held in Brussels, which I'll be coming to Brussels for on the 23rd of April. And I think that's a good issue, good time to raise it. And if you want some cheesy connection to put into the British media, it's St George's Day, which is the English National Day, 23rd of April. So we can use that as far as we can to get the message across. Quite simply, the analysis that Julian has offered us by virtue of the information he's published on the activities of the CIA, what went on in Afghanistan, in Iraq, what went on in undermining democratic governments all around the world, and the methods, as the previous speaker pointed out, of the endless pursuit of radical journalism by the United States administration is a threat not just to the individual journalists, bad as that is, it's a threat to the right of all of us to know. And in an age of social media, there is a desperation by those that would keep us in the dark to return us to that place by political, legal, and physical control of those that try and tell us the truth about what's going on. So my support is absolutely there for Julian, and will continue to be so. And we do have a group of us in Parliament, an all-party group, it must be said. It includes Conservatives and others who are serious about this issue and serious about putting as much political pressure as we can on the United States at the same time. And so that we're doing, and that we're developing a lot. But we do need to somehow or other up the game in the popular press and the popular media, that Julian is a victim of those that would keep us in the dark. And surely to goodness, all the horrors of Ukraine, all the horrors of all the killing, all the bombing, all the body bags that are going back, and the now 3 million people that have gone into exile. There's a big story behind all of that. And there's a big story to be told about the way in which so many nations prepare for war when they should be preparing for peace. And there are so many vested interests that are endlessly preparing for war, not for peace. I do not condone the war. I do not condone the invasion. I do not condone the bombing. I want to see peace in the future. We do that by knowing the truth about those that actually spend their whole time preparing for war. So thank you all for being on the call tonight. Thank you for all that you do. And there is a lot of solidarity here in London with Julian. And indeed, somebody very helpfully put up Free Julian Assange banner on the street lamp opposite my house last year. I didn't really need reminding, but it was very kind of them to do so. So we'll carry on with that campaign. And I look forward to physically seeing everybody on the 23rd.
Thank you, Jeremy, and really glad to hear you that you will be with us on the 23rd. And thank you for your contributions and for your work. I'd now like to just quickly pick up on a few points related to the legal elements of the case before we move over to hearing from the various speakers and any questions that you might have. Please feel free to firstly use the hand raise function within Zoom to put up your hand so I know, so we have a little queue of people who are ready to ask questions. And also, if you would like, use the Q&A function if you have any comments or questions. One of the things that really bothers me about Julian's case is it's opened my eyes not just to, to the fact that we had an illegal war in Iraq and we've destroyed people's lives in Afghanistan, and that we tortured 789 Muslim men in Guantanamo, or the, I to some extent I even knew that nations organized behind the scenes to prevent their criminality from being exposed. But what has been really depressing for me about Julian's case is the complete and utter removal of any form of due process for Julian throughout, and what that means for everybody else. So as a trade unionist, as an academic, as an activist, it really bothers me that the person who revealed not just these war crimes, but also the dumping of toxic waste on the Ivory Coast by Trafigura, the corruption in Kenya within Arap Moi's government, the kinds of things that were happening behind the scenes in Tunisia and therefore helped with the Arab Spring. Julian did a lot to change the world of journalism. He helped us to have the first ever secure drop where whistleblowers could anonymously provide information to journalists, not just large media journalists like The Guardian or the New York Times or the Washington Post, but smaller local journalists who understood the context of that information were able to explain it to local audiences and had an attention span, slightly longer than some of the oligopolist controlled media. Julian helped through his work to ensure that not only were the whistleblowers safe, but we were safe because the information was accurate. And you can see from the wide range of people who have helped Julian, including the Iraq body count, John Sloboda, Andy Worthington from the Gitmo files, so many experts, Stefania Maurizi in Italy, all these experts worked with Julian to ensure that the data that WikiLeaks provided was accurate. So much so that to this day, WikiLeaks is one of the few media organizations, or the only media organization of note, that has a 100% accuracy record. And it is very important that Julian created these wonderful connections that allowed us to hold our governments to account, because our governments were not just performing war crimes or mistakes once in a while. This was standard policy. This is standard policy to this day. But in order to expose these crimes and to tell the truth, Julian has paid a very high price. And it's not just Julian who has paid this price. When I have looked at his elderly father, his now wife, his children suffering, it has been extremely hard to watch. Julian has from the start been considered guilty without any crime. And this is a feature of using the Extradition Act to where there is a presumption of guilt. You don't have to have something proven beyond reasonable doubt or even on the balance of probabilities. The expectation is that Julian will be extradited, and certain bars have to be breached in order for that extradition not to take place. So already it is a great parallel to Guantanamo, in that there is, in the Guantanamo military commissions, there is no jury. And similarly, in Julian's case, it is a single judge at a lower court who makes the decision as to whether he will go. And the judges in this process have a lot to answer for. Many of them have serious and repeated conflicts of interest. One of the judges has even had the temerity to pronounce Julian a narcissist after he had only said his name. And this is the kind of abusive process that has taken place throughout. Another judge has serious conflicts of interest in that her son works for a company called, has investments in a company called Dark Trace. And Mark Curtis and Matt Kennard, the wonderful journalists at Declassified UK who exposed this, show how, sorry, you can hear my children in the background, have exposed how this judge has not just not recused herself, she's been deeply involved as the overseeing magistrate in the process. There has also been a denial of due process because the prosecuting state has plotted to murder the defendant within a sovereign embassy. There has been a misuse of bail violation, which is a trivial crime, which is not even a crime, especially when you seek asylum. So it's also a breach of the asylum sanctity. That his asylum is not treated as asylum, it's treated as a bail violation. But also, he has been spied upon, his privileged legal conversations have been spied upon, and the FBI's key witness against him is a convicted pedophile and fraudster. So there is nothing in this case that is normal and easy to understand as to why this case is even going ahead and why he is sitting in Belmarsh for 3 years. And Andre talked earlier about, it might go to the European Court of Human Rights, but I think one of the reasons this event in Brussels is so important, and I'm grateful to Boris and the team of activists across the world who are involved in organizing this, because the US's plan, to my mind, sitting on the outside, is for Julian to die in prison in Britain, for him to be tortured to death, which is what we can see from Professor Niels Meltzer's work and his wonderful recent book, that they have left no stone unturned to increase the psychological torture against Julian. And unless we come together and apply some political pressure, this situation will not change. Even, I said to the journalists outside Belmarsh yesterday, I'd like you to stop talking about whether Stella is wearing a Vivienne Westwood gown and ask the question as to why there is a journalist sitting behind those prison walls and you're sitting here with those policemen in the middle, not even allowing you to take a photo properly of the bride. This kind of persistent, visible brutality can only be countered by persistent and visible organization. And that's why it's very important that people bring together lots of other people who do not know much about Julian, who might just be interested in the music, to come along and understand what's really going on in the case. And I'll stop there and invite questions from everybody. We have some people in the queue already. So may I start with Karin, please? And could I request the DEA hosts to please unmute Karin if that's possible? Thank you. Over to you, Karin. You will have to unmute yourself before asking your question, and if you can specify who your question is for, or if it's for the general panel. I'm not yet able to hear you, Karin, so I'm going to ask you to repeat your question again, or please use the Q&A function to post your question, and I'll come back to you and try again in a second. If we could go to Yanni Di Giovanni, please. Yanni, over to you.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
All right. Yes. The question, first of all, is for all of you. I am not sure right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as my understanding goes, the last say belongs to Priti Patel right now. Is that correct?
I didn't catch the second half of your question. You said you're not sure, but then
I'm not sure. I mean, does Priti Patel at the moment have the last saying? Yes or no?
Okay. I can possibly answer that. No, Priti Patel doesn't have the, well, it is a process by which the magistrates court sends it to Priti Patel. During that period, I believe Julian's lawyers have several weeks to launch what is called a cross appeal. And that will cover the various grounds of the case that were lost by Julian at magistrates court stage. As I said to you, the presumption is for extradition. So the only bit he won was one of the bars which allowed him on grounds of his mental health to not be extradited.
Right. But then I mean, the reason why I'm asking is because I've been reading this through like several sources. That is why I actually started this sort of like a very small movement on Facebook, try to push everybody to email Priti Patel to convince her to drop the allegation. Would that be the extradition? I mean, sorry. Would that be the wrong move? Would you say?
No, I think it is always good to put political pressure on from all over the world on people like Priti Patel, because while they are in positions of power, they must know that we are all looking. But thank you for that question. And if
yes, I actually like one more that I believe the most important. I don't want to take anybody's time, but I believe this is very important. May I please go ahead and ask?
If it's very quick. Yes.
I will try my best. All right. After reading, I just finished reading Neil Meltzer's book, right? And he argues that if the mainstream media will start talking nonstop about Julian Assange, taking his defense, he will be released in no time. Now, given there is really no faith in the mainstream media doing that, do you believe that it would be a good strategy to contact someone, let's say like Joe Rogan, that is way more popular than the mainstream media, and to convince him to interviewing Nils Meltzer and Stefania Maurizi, so the American public can be properly educated on what's happening and change public opinion that way?
Well, I think there are a few people around the room who can comment on that. Perhaps Ernest would like to say what he thinks about getting alternative media, like people like Joe Rogan, who have a phenomenal reach to respond to things because the mainstream media isn't listening, or whether you consider another strategy. And then I'll come to Ogmundur next. Over to you, Ernest.
Thank you very much. Well, I believe that like the slogan of Tesco once said, that every little helps. So the more we have people campaigning for him, the better, I suppose. But it is also a legal process, and we have to see where that takes us, because once a decision, this judicial decision has been made, it is still up to the Home Secretary, as I understand, to decide whether to go ahead with the extradition or not. So, but in the meantime, we got to try everything we can. And if there are people who are popular, now I wonder whether they're popular with the politicians or popular with the public. I don't think there are any elections coming up in the UK to sort of put them under pressure. But every single person who will be willing to join the campaign will be welcome, I suppose.
Thank you, Ernest. And I'd like to invite the other panelists, including Ogmundur, who's a former journalist, if you would like to make any comments. And I have a few questions which have come through in the chat, so in the Q&A tab. So can I just remind all the panelists to have a look at those, and please indicate to me if you would like to take any of those questions. Thank you. Over to you, Ogmundur. You are still muted.
Well, Deepa, you took up the legal complications. As to the journalistic ones, I, for one, think that any news media which is willing to take up our cause and explain it is good. And I would support that wholeheartedly, whether it be Joe Rogan or others, very wholeheartedly.
Thank you. And I guess the other side of this is that it is still important to pay attention to the mainstream media, because a lot of people get their news directly from the mainstream media, and it is still important to keep up the pressure on them to be asking the right questions and to encourage them to pay attention. Our next question.
May I just add that when I was in London in 2019 in the spring, and we had a demonstration. We were in front of Buckingham Palace. We went to Downing Street, and anywhere we asked the mainstream media to come along and wanted our events to be covered. The only one which did so was Russian RT, Russian television, and I was going to look it up an hour ago, you know, what they had said, but then it was closed, of course, as we know.
Yes, it is interesting that RT have done a fantastic job of covering Julian's case at various stages, and so have Rupley, and Barnaby Neberka's fantastic photo of Julian leaving in the white van is one that is used all over the world. Our next question is from Karin Hemming, and this is probably aimed at the politicians in the room. It says, we are about to have an election here in Australia. We have visited, written to, and handed over petitions to our Prime Minister, Foreign Affairs Minister, and Leader of the Opposition. As yet, we have had nothing more than a thank you from their officers. In the case of the Labour Opposition Leader's office, they said they would trash the request and emails regarding Julian Assange. How do we get our politicians to listen? Asks Karen. And then I will come to a question from John Lehan. Andre, would you like to take that on Karen's comment that they are either sending the mainstream politicians, or the Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister are sending a thank you note if they send in a petition, and the opposition's leaders' offices are binning the emails. So how can they influence politicians in Australia, given there is an election?
Well, I don't know how exactly the Australian system is working. I can say from my point of view, if you get emails, you first check, is it an email from my city, from my constituency? And what is most influencing is to try to reach personal contact, to have a meeting in the constituency office or something like this. I get hundreds or maybe even more than 1,000 emails a day, but you have quite a system, and of course you're very much trying to have some kind of hierarchy and all what is influencing your surrounding, your city, or and the best is always to try to get personal contact. That's what I can say in general, but I don't know exactly how it works in Australia.
Yes, and hopefully we will have some other experts who understand the Australian context available, and maybe John Shipton will also be able to say a few words on the work they've been doing with the parliamentary group in Australia. So that might be something that can help you, Karin. I appreciate we don't have a full answer for you at the moment, but that's some useful basic information from Andre. Our last question for tonight, unless anybody puts their hand up very quickly, is from John Lehan. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. I beg your pardon if I haven't. He says, the unorthodox and frankly ill-willed application of law is something that concerns him. And could the way forward already be prearranged and the outcome? And he feels that, I can't see a question in here, John. And he's worried that the legal team will be spending lots of money and effort on the process, and actually the outcome is already decided. And that's that. So I'll leave that as a comment because I can't quite figure out the question there, and that might be my inadequacy. So I'd like to firstly say this is an important event to prepare for the event in April. It is really important that everybody who is here, even if you can contact 5 or 6 other people who will be there in person in Brussels, that would be really helpful. It would be helpful if local solidarity groups with Julian were to organize to make sure that there are either not truckloads, but at least coachloads of people coming over to Brussels to support the event, because our public presence is important. And lastly, a big thank you from Carolina and also from others to both the organizers of the concert and rally, and also to the speakers tonight. I'd like to thank the speakers for being here today, wish John Rees a quick recovery, and thank you also to David for his wonderful musical start to this. And if you want to engage in this discussion in more depth in person, then please join us on the 23rd of April, and also for the academic event the night before at the Free University of Brussels. Thanks everybody, and good night.